I didn't expect my life to shatter in the middle of a corporate conference room under fluorescent lights. I was standing with a coffee in one hand, nerves crawling under my skin, trying to look composed as my wife, Madison Green, head of HR at Westbridge Dynamics, took the mic during our quarterly staff meeting. She was glowing. The kind of glow that doesn't come from hard work or accomplishment, but from having a secret, from knowing something no one else in the room does. Something dirty. I wasn't just a mid-level manager. I was one of the founding members of the division. Everyone knew I was next in line for promotion. Hell, even my department had thrown me a pre-congrats lunch last Friday. Then Madison smiled, tilted her head just slightly, and I knew something was wrong. She looked straight at me. "Congratulations, Paul," she said into the mic, but her eyes were on me. "You're the new director of strategy." A few gasps around the room. Whispers. Then confused silence. Paul? Paul freaking Warren, the guy who shows up at 10 a.m., talks in buzzwords he barely understands, spends half the day taking long lunches and the other half sitting at Madison's desk, leaning too close. It didn't feel real. I blinked, assuming I misheard. Then Madison added, just loud enough for those nearby to catch it, but quiet enough to pretend it wasn't intentional. "He's a teammate, and your wife's new boyfriend." She turned, smiling like the cat that just buried the family dog in the backyard. Laughter. Not from the crowd. From Paul. He actually chuckled and shook my hand as he walked past me. That smug, lazy bastard actually patted me on the back like I should be happy for him. I felt the heat rise in my neck. Not rage. Not yet. Something worse: confusion, humiliation, disbelief. My hand reached into my briefcase. No hesitation. I pulled out the sealed envelope I'd written at 3 a.m. the night before when I couldn't sleep, the one I never thought I'd actually need. The one with everything: resignation letter, documentation, proof of what I had suspected for weeks but never dared admit to myself. I walked to her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I just stood in front of Madison as she still held the mic in one hand, basking in her moment. "Thanks for the chance," I said, and handed her the envelope. She took it with that same smirk on her lips. Like this was a joke. Like I'd lost, and she was letting me walk away out of mercy. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was what that envelope actually contained. And the moment she'd open it, her little power trip would start to spiral. Hard. I left the conference room before she even broke the seal. I didn't look back. But trust me, she would. She would look back at everything. And that's where this story begins. I drove straight past our house that afternoon, not because I was afraid of seeing her, but because I knew if I walked through that door right then, I'd either say something I couldn't take back or break something that couldn't be fixed. Instead, I went to a quiet diner near the edge of town, the kind with bad coffee and a jukebox that only played sad songs from decades ago. Fitting. I sat there, staring at the cheap ceramic mug, thinking about how the last few months had felt like an itch I couldn't reach. Madison had been distant, colder. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped looking at me like I was her husband. And I blamed myself. I thought maybe I was working too much. Maybe I lost touch. Maybe we just hit that marriage slump they talk about in magazines. But no, she hadn't drifted away. She'd run full speed into another man's arms, and worse, brought him into my job, into my career path, and promoted him using my years of work. That wasn't drifting. That was sabotage. 2 hours later, I went home. Quietly. She wasn't there, and I was thankful. But her scent still lingered in the house, the same perfume she used to wear for me, now soaked into clothes she likely peeled off for him. I walked into our bedroom and saw her phone lighting up on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The messages weren't hidden. She didn't even bother with a lock screen. "Paul, you looked so hot up there giving that speech. Can't wait to celebrate again tonight. Madison, bring that wine I like. And those hands. Winky face." My hands trembled, but not from rage. From some twisted mixture of grief and realization. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't hiding it. She wanted me to see it. Like this was a game, and humiliating me at work was just level 1. I took screenshots. Every message. Every photo. Even the older ones. The ones from a month ago. 2 months. Texts that stretched back further than I expected, layered in lies, stolen time, and false excuses. Working late. Corporate dinner. Girls' night. Every word she ever said about loyalty now felt like acid in my veins. Then the photos. They weren't graphic, not in the usual sense. But the way he looked at her in them, the casual, victorious confidence on his face, The way she leaned into him like he was her everything, it wrecked me in a way fists never could. Because I remembered when she used to look at me like that. Years ago. Before she decided I wasn't enough. I forwarded the texts to my email. Made copies. Sent them to a cloud folder labeled insurance. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. But I was going to end this properly. I sat in our living room, staring at the ring she left on the counter the week before. She said she took it off because her fingers were swelling from stress. I believed her. Like a fool. That night, she came home humming. She walked in with that same smug glow on her face and a grocery bag full of wine, strawberries, and candles. For a second, she froze when she saw me on the couch. But only for a second. "Oh," she said, pretending to be surprised. "Didn't expect you to be home." "No," I replied calmly. "You expected me to be gone. Like always." She walked past me without shame. Not a flicker of guilt. Just arrogance. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Don't act like you didn't see this coming. Maybe if you were a little more ambitious." I stood up. "You mean like Paul?" She finally turned to face me. And that mask of hers cracked for half a breath. "You went through my phone," she snapped. "You left it unlocked," I said. "Like you wanted me to see." She smirked. "Maybe I did. Maybe it's time you knew what a real man looks like in action." That was it. The moment I realized she wasn't sorry, wasn't remorseful, she was proud. And in that moment, the grief turned into clarity. She thought she had power. She didn't know what I had already done. The next morning, I showed up at the office. Not for her. Not for Paul. For me. To take control of the ending. The front desk girl, Emma, looked nervous when she saw me walk in. Word travels fast. But I nodded politely and made my way to the legal department. I had a scheduled meeting. One I booked 3 weeks ago, when the dots started connecting in my head, but before the humiliation turned public. The envelope I gave Madison during that meeting? It didn't just hold a resignation letter. It contained a formal complaint of ethical misconduct, backed by screenshots, email threads, date-stamped files, and a well-documented case of workplace favoritism, sexual impropriety, and abuse of power. And yes, it pointed directly to Paul and Madison. See, Paul's promotion wasn't just unfair. It was illegal. HR policies are strict, especially when the person promoting you is in an undisclosed romantic relationship with you. And Madison, in her arrogance, never filed disclosure forms. Never even tried to hide it properly. She thought I'd sulk away. Instead, I let the company bury her. That same afternoon, Paul was placed on immediate administrative leave. A formal investigation launched. I heard from someone in finance that his badge was revoked before he even left the elevator. He texted Madison 5 times in a row. She didn't answer. She was too busy dealing with the fallout. I didn't even need to lift a finger at that point. She buried herself. By the time I got back home, she was sitting on the edge of the bed with a bottle of wine and her laptop. Not working, panicking. She glanced at me, eyes cold but cautious. "You set me up," she hissed. "No," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. "You set yourself up. I just made sure someone pressed play." She stood up, full of fake rage. "You think this makes you a man? Running to corporate like some weak little boy?" "No," I said. "But I think watching you burn your own career down with your bare hands does." Her mouth opened like she wanted to spit more venom, but for once, she didn't know what to say. So instead, she threw the wine glass. It shattered against the wall behind me. I didn't flinch. "You're pathetic," she screamed. "You never knew how to satisfy me. You never had fire." Paul knows how to take control." That word, control, bounced around in my skull. "Is that what you think this is?" I said quietly. "A game of control? You really think you won something?" She walked toward me, chest out, rage burning behind those eyes. "I took what I wanted. That's what strong women do. You were a placeholder, Kyle. A paycheck. I never needed your permission." That part? That hit. Not because it was true, but because she believed it. All the years. The loyalty. The planning. The gentle nights. The small sacrifices I made to make sure she could build her HR empire while I handled the boring parts of life: bills, plumbing, broken fences, late-night runs for her cravings, silent support when she failed her first promotion bid. All of it, rewritten in her head as a burden she carried. I walked past her, toward my home office. Pulled out the folder labeled Finale. Dropped it on the dining table. "What's that?" she asked, suspicious. "Divorce papers," I said. "And a list of everything in this house I paid for. Which is, by the way, everything." She lunged for the folder and started flipping through. "You're insane," she said, voice cracking. You won't get anything. I don't need to, I replied. Just need to make sure you don't either. I watched her crumble a little, just a flicker, as she realized the depth of what I'd done. Every document, every asset, even the car she drove, it was in my name. I'd moved funds, rerouted accounts, not illegally, just smartly. She threw the folder across the room. You think I'll beg? She shouted. You think I'll crawl back? No, I said. I think you'll sink. And I'll watch. Silently. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not from joy. From clarity. She backed away, stunned that her usual tricks had no effect anymore. But we weren't done. Not yet. 2 days passed without a word between us. No shouting. No apologies. No begging. Just silence thick enough to drown in. Madison stayed in the guest room like a ghost clinging to a house that no longer belonged to her. Then came Friday morning. I was making coffee, just like always, when the doorbell rang. I expected a delivery. Instead, I opened the door to find Paul standing on my porch, holding a gym bag and looking like he hadn't slept in days. She blocked me, he said, without a hello. Won't answer my calls, won't return my stuff from her place. I need to talk to her. I stared at him. This man, this leech who wormed his way into my life, into my career, into my marriage, now stood in front of me like a lost puppy. Her place. I asked calmly. This is my house. He blinked. You don't get it, I added. She doesn't live here anymore. You two took something from me. Now I'm taking everything back. He tried to protest, say something snarky, but then Madison appeared behind me, barefoot in my t-shirt, hair tangled, mascara still smudged from whatever pitiful sleep she managed. She saw him and froze. You told me you kicked him out, Paul said to her, voice sharp. I said I was handling it, she replied. You showing up here makes you look weak. He stepped forward. You used me. You said we'd be building something. Madison cut him off with a laugh. Cold. Hollow. I said we had fun. That doesn't mean I'm taking you seriously. That was it. I almost pitted the guy. Almost. Paul looked at me one last time, realizing that whatever sick fantasy he built around Madison had just crumbled at his feet. Then he walked away without another word. I closed the door, locking it behind him. Madison poured herself a glass of water like nothing happened. He was getting clingy anyway. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing left of the woman I once loved. Just a shell stuffed full of arrogance and poison. You keep playing games like you're untouchable, I said, but you forgot one thing. She raised an eyebrow. I was never your weakness, I told her. I was your shield. The only thing between you and the consequences. Her smirk faltered. Finally, that afternoon, I made the call to our lawyer. Set the divorce in motion. She thought she'd delay it, twist it, drag me into her little world of manipulation. But I prepared for that too. Every text, every voice memo, every document of her relationship with a subordinate. It was all ready to go. That weekend, I met with Catherine, my friend from legal, who'd helped me gather the evidence. She handed me a flash drive and smiled. HR ethics violations. Company policy breaches. She's not just losing her job, she might never work in HR again. I didn't smile back. It wasn't joy I felt. It was justice. When I handed Madison the notice that her role at the company was terminated effective immediately, she laughed. A nervous, fake little sound that cracked halfway through. They wouldn't dare. They already did, I replied. I turned to leave, but she wasn't done. You think this makes you better than me? She yelled. You think ruining me makes you strong? I stopped at the door. No, I said, but it means I'm free. And that, for the first time in months, felt real. The weight in my chest loosened. I didn't need her to cry. I just needed her to understand what she lost. And now she did. I moved out the next day. Not because I had to. Legally, the house was mine. Financially, she didn't have a leg to stand on. But I didn't want to waste another breath under the same roof that echoed with her lies. Let her sit in the living room surrounded by furniture I bought, staring at a future that was suddenly empty. I booked a furnished apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just quiet. Clean. My name on the lease, my own space, no echoes of betrayal in the walls. It was the first time in years I actually slept through the night. Madison started calling on day 3. Not to apologize. No, she tried to manipulate. Threaten. Guilt trip. Classic tricks from her arsenal. You're destroying my life, Kyle. I made one mistake. One mistake, I said, cutting her off. You turned years of my trust into your personal joke. She started to fake cry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I hung up. That night, She sent me a photo of our wedding day. Us smiling. Young. Stupid. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't delete it. But I didn't reply either. The next week, her brother reached out to me. Jason. We hadn't spoken in months. He'd always been cold, distant, skeptical of me, like I wasn't good enough for his sister. I just wanted you to know, he said, that we didn't know. About Paul. About what she did. We thought you left her. She said you cheated. Of course she did. Thanks, I said, without emotion. But it's done. Jason paused. She's not doing well. She chose this, I said. Let her live in it. I thought I was done hearing from her. I thought I'd finally carved her voice out of my life like a tumor. Then came the knock on my apartment door. I opened it, expecting a delivery. It was Madison. No makeup. Hair a mess. Wearing the coat I bought her 2 Christmases ago. I want to talk, she said. I leaned on the doorframe. Why? Because, she looked down. Because I think I lost something I didn't realize I needed. I waited. I didn't think you'd actually walk away, she whispered. I thought you'd yell. Fight. Throw something. I never expected you to go quiet. I laughed. Once. Cold and sharp. That's because you never knew who I was. You just assumed I'd stay no matter what. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. Can we fix this? There it was. The desperation. The realization that not only had she lost control, she'd lost the only person who ever kept her grounded. No, I said. There's no fixing what you lit on fire and danced around. She stepped forward. I didn't move. She hesitated. You don't miss me? I thought about it. I really did. About the laughter we used to share. About the late nights building dreams together. About the woman she used to be before ambition turned into poison. I miss the idea of you, I said. But the real you? The one who looked me in the eye while handing my career to your boyfriend? That version? I hope I never see her again. She tried to speak. I closed the door before she could. I didn't slam it. Just shut it gently. Final. And on the other side, I heard her cry. But I didn't open it. Weeks passed. Every day away from her felt like shedding dead weight. I started to breathe differently. Stand differently. There wasn't a soundtrack of manipulation playing in the background of my life anymore. No sideways comments about my clothes. No rolling eyes when I spoke. No sarcastic jabs at dinner with her colleagues. Just peace. Cold, steady peace. My phone buzzed less and less. Madison eventually gave up. Maybe she realized there were no more buttons to push. Or maybe she finally saw herself the way I had come to, as someone who destroyed a good man out of boredom and ego, then cried victim when the fire circled back. One Friday evening, I got an email. Not from her. From HR. The final report. I opened it slowly, expecting the usual corporate soft language. But it wasn't soft. It was brutal. Following internal investigation, Madison Green and Paul Warren were both found to have violated multiple ethical policies, including but not limited to abuse of power, failure to disclose a romantic relationship, and retaliatory behavior. The letter went on. They were both officially blacklisted from rehire. Several partner companies had been notified. Quietly, discreetly, but word travels. She wasn't just jobless. She was radioactive. I closed the file and deleted it. I didn't need to reread it. I didn't need to share it. Some victories don't need applause. That weekend, I drove to the lake house. Alone. No bags. No plans. Just me in silence. The one place that was always ours, but never tainted by her lies. She hated going there. Said it was boring. Isolated. But I loved the isolation. I craved it now. Sitting on the dock, beer in hand, watching the sun drop over the water, I finally asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Did I still love her? The answer came fast. No. I loved who she pretended to be. The partner she wore like a mask. The version of her I married was either fake or dead. Either way, she was gone. And I wasn't grieving anymore. My phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You ruined my life. I hope you're proud. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't feed her. I powered the phone off and dropped it on the bench beside me. The breeze carried the last embers of that chapter into the water. She burned us down. But I walked out of the fire. And I didn't look back. A few months later, I was in a different rhythm. New job. New address. Even my walk had changed, shoulders a bit straighter, steps quieter but more intentional. I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone anymore. Especially not to ghosts. I had a morning ritual now. Wake up at 6. Black coffee. Run 2 miles. Silence. It was my anchor, something no one could hijack or weaponize. Then, out of nowhere, her name showed up in a news headline. I wasn't looking for her. Wasn't even thinking about her. But there it was, flashing across a business gossip site someone forwarded me without comment. Former Westbridge HR head denied position after ethics probe surfaces. There was a photo of her beneath the headline. Madison. Same smug face, only now surrounded by text that hinted at scandal and blacklisting and alleged misconduct. It didn't mention Paul directly, but it didn't have to. People read between the lines, especially in corporate. I stared at the photo for a long time, not out of satisfaction, but out of disbelief at how fast everything had crumbled once the mask slipped. She used to say she wanted to be untouchable. Now she couldn't even get past the reception desk. That evening, I passed a cafe I hadn't been to since before the storm. On impulse, I stepped inside, ordered her old drink, just to remember what it felt like. It tasted hollow. On the way out, I spotted someone familiar across the street. For a second, I froze. Blonde hair, tall heels, gray coat. Madison? But it wasn't her. Just someone who looked like the version of her I used to love, sharp, poised, untouched by bitterness. That realization hit deeper than I expected. She wasn't unique. She was just first. The first to cut me, to shake the foundation, to remind me how brutal love can become when poisoned by ego. But she wouldn't be the last woman I ever trusted. She just taught me what happens when you choose the wrong one. Later that week, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Elegant. Perfectly spaced. Like everything else she used to fake. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, it was short. I thought I had power. You had silence. You win. That was it. No apology. No confession. Just a sentence. A whimper from someone who finally understood what it meant to lose. I folded it once. Tucked it into a drawer I rarely opened. Not to keep the memory alive, but to remind myself of the cost of ignoring red flags just because they wore perfume and said the right words. I went back to my coffee. Back to my silence. And smiled. For the first time in years. Not because I'd won, but because I was finally, truly free. 6 months later, the last trace of her was gone. The divorce was finalized. Clean, sharp, and uncontested, because she knew better than to drag it out. I walked out with everything I came in with, and more importantly, without the weight of her name chained to mine. There was no fight in court. No final plea. She signed the papers quietly. Maybe she finally understood what silence really meant. The day I got the finalized documents, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post some cryptic quote online or drink myself into satisfaction. I went home, lit a small fire in the backyard pit, and burned the last photo we ever took together. It was from a Christmas party 2 years ago. We looked perfect. She wore red. I wore navy. We smiled like we believed the lie. The flame swallowed it slowly, curling the corners before turning her face into ash. That was the true ending, not the screaming. Not the revenge, not even the HR takedown. The real ending was peace. Madison tried once more, just weeks ago. A late-night voicemail. I had a dream we were happy again. I woke up crying. I miss your steadiness. I miss being the girl you looked at like I was everything. I didn't return the call. Because that girl? She was never real. And I'd stopped mourning illusions. Instead, I started building something real. Quiet. Honest. With someone who didn't need to tear me down to feel powerful. It's early still, no fairy tale. But there's laughter. Respect. Eyes that don't lie. And that's more than I ever had with Madison. If someone asked me what I learned, I'd say this. Don't ignore the small signs. The sideways insults. The cheap shots in public masked as jokes. The phone turned upside down. The constant rewriting of your reality. If love makes you shrink, makes you question your worth, makes you beg for the bare minimum, it's not love. It's a mirror shattering slowly. Walk away before the glass reaches your throat. And if someone ever betrays you the way she betrayed me, don't scream. Don't beg. Don't break. Just get quiet. Because silence, when backed by truth, is the loudest weapon in the world. And when the dust settles, you'll still be standing. And they'll be choking on everything they thought they had control of. That's not just closure. That's justice.